checking if I'm unmuted. When I was asked to participate in this Link Footsteps, I wonder, how can I summarize my life experiences into 8 to 10-minute presentation? So, I bring to you my life as a crazy patchwork quilt. I was in the early years of this 21st century that I was introduced to quilting. A couple of co-workers were avid quilters and began showing their handiwork at the office. After many ahs and whoas, they told my friend Angie and I, you guys can do this too. It's not difficult. For a while, we were full of questions about how they did this or that, where they got supplies, tools, you name it. The next time they said, you guys can do this too. It's not difficult. We looked at each other and smiled. That lunchtime, we headed to the fabric store, purchased a book with a pattern, and picked the fabric. Within an hour or so, and began the quilting journey, and I was hooked. There were the trips to the Houston Quilt Show with the girls, the blocks of the month at the local quilt shop, the Friday quilting hours, and on and on. On a trip to a quilt show, the thought came to me, our lives are like quilts. You see so many quilts, and each one is uniquely different. Even if they are the same pattern, they are different. There are different sizes, different colors, yet all designed for a purpose. I am a quilt made by the Creator God. Psalms 139, 13 to 14 tells me, for you created my inmost being. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. God designed this quilt, and He is in the process of creating His masterpieces to show at His universal quilt show. Ephesians 2:10 tells me that we are God's masterpiece. I have come to the conclusion that I am a crazy patchwork quilt. Before I explain why, I believe this. I would like to explain to you what a patchwork quilt is. According to the Free Dictionary, a patchwork quilt is a quilt made by sewing patches of different materials together. For example, these patches come and they are made in a design. Many of you are like these quilts. You have a centerpiece from where your life flows into different parts of your life. Or you have a specific square for each stage of your life separated by stages. Then there is the crazy patchwork in which you have odd pieces of fabrics of different weights, colors, shapes, densities, and they are sewn together to make a quilt. This one is the one I identify with. I am the firstborn child in a preacher's family of 6. Dad was a pastor and mom a teacher in the Seventh-day Adventist Church in El Salvador, when the first patch of my quilt came to be. I was a big center patch for a couple of years until my brother came along. By that time, we had already moved to Panama, and so my patches began to be stitched together with totally different characteristics one from the other, and the circumstances consistently changed. We also moved to Mexico and to Guatemala and Costa Rica. Some patches are very small in my quilt as it represents very short-lived relationships. Other patches are more elaborate and constantly embellished as it represents relationships that have survived the pass of time and distance. All my education patches have been in several Adventist institutions, except the MBA from a Nazarene university. There, I learned to love Jesus because he first loved me, and to share Jesus with those around me and around the world. Although I worked while in school, I didn't officially begin to add work patches until I began to work at the Ontario Conference in 1988. My family was moving to Canada, and I had the option to come or to stay. I had recently graduated from college, and they had to decide if I would be included in the permanent resident application, as I was over age limit to join my family. I decided that they should include me in the application, and if the Canadian consulate accepted me as part of the family, I would move to Canada. And if they wanted me to file separately, I would stay and either move to Panama or pursue residence in Costa Rica. We began to pray for God's will in my life. And in a stormy January evening in 1987, we arrived in Montreal to establish Spanish work among the recent Spanish-speaking immigrants. All my church badges are closely linked to my work life or my father's work life. These badges are as varied as they come, as church families are all different. In some, I experienced spiritual revival. In others, I was received as family. I also met individuals there from different cultures and backgrounds, and yet all my church patches are linked by the thread of God's love weaved through all this. As I moved to different locations in the United States and Canada, still working for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I learned to accept the patches that God wants to include in my quilt. It has not been easy. It is not always easy, as I want to design my own patches and manage them my own way. But he told me in Jeremiah 29:11 that his plan for my quilt is the best for me. He says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and future." After several years of living in the United States, in 2019, I came back to Canada. And since then, I have been adding Newfoundland patches to my crazy patchwork quilt. Some of you are already making contributions to the patchwork on my quilt with your words, your songs, your smiles, your hospitality. I don't have to worry about my quilt anymore, especially about what purpose it plays in life. Because Psalms 138:8 tells me that the Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. And every day, as I let him do his handiwork in me, my quilt becomes more beautiful. Our quilts will not be finished on this earth, but in the earth made new, when God will bind all the patches together in perfect harmony, and we will get to see the finished product. Meanwhile, remember that God is still working in me and you to make me what I need to be. It took him just a week to make the moon and the stars, the sun and the earth, Jupiter and Mars. How loving and patient he must be, because he's still working on me.